It's story time, it's story time. Do you want to hear a story? It's story time, it's story time. Would you like to hear a story? Hello everyone. I am Suesette and this is Suesette's Story Time for children and their parents and anybody who would love to hear a story. Last Friday we were talking about the Miss Nelson collection. Yes, and we were talking about a teacher named Miss Nelson, right? Miss Nelson had a hard time controlling her class. There she is, Miss Nelson. So she decided, did you see Miss Nelson? Let's see. Okay, there she is. So she decided to become Miss Viola Swamp because she had a hard time controlling her class. But Miss Swamp really controlled the class really good. So the kids wanted Miss Nelson to come back because Miss Swamp was so strict. So they even got a detective to go and find Miss Nelson. Yes, they did. So now they found Miss Nelson. Miss Nelson came back, and now guess who's missing? Miss Swamp. Okay. So now we're talking about Miss Nelson is back. Yes, Miss Nelson is back. So let's read about Miss Nelson and see how she's doing while she came back to school, okay? One Friday, Miss Nelson told her class that she was going to have her tonsils out. I'll be away next week, she said, and I expect you to behave. Yes, Miss Nelson, said the kids in room 207. So they are obeying Miss Nelson now because they had missed her. And now she's saying she has to go to the hospital to get her tonsils out. You know where your tonsils are? Right here, yeah. Okay. But at recess, it was another story. Wow, said the kids. While Miss Nelson is away, we can really act up. Not so fast, said a big kid from 309. Haven't you heard of Viola Swamp? Who? Said Miss Nelson's kids. Miss Swamp is the meanest substitute in the whole world, said the big kid. Ooh, said Miss Nelson's kids. She's a real witch, said the big kid. Ooh, said Miss Nelson's kids. I'll just bet you get the swamp, said the big kid. Yeah, so this big kid is telling them they better watch out for Viola Swamp because Viola Swamp is really, really strict. So the kids said, ooh, okay, we're going to watch out. So let's see what's going to happen, okay? On Monday morning, Miss Nelson's kids were all in their seats. They were very nervous. Some of them had not slept well in the weekend. If we get the swamp, I'll just die, said the one kid. They heard footsteps in the hall. Slowly, knob turned. The knob turned slowly, and the door opened. I bet they are really, really scared. You see the teacher right there in the doorway? Let's see. It was Mr. Bladsworth, the principal. I shall personally take over the class, he said. Miss Nelson's kids were so relieved it wasn't Viola Swamp, yes. But they soon learned that Mr. Bladworth was not a lot of fun. I guess he wasn't a lot of fun like Miss Nelson was, yes. All morning, Mr. Blonso tried to amuse the class with his corny card tricks. Oh, brother, said the class. They were tired of those card tricks. That afternoon, Mr. Blotso showed the class his favorite shadow pictures. This is kid stuff, said that class. They thought they were just too big for that. The next day, Mr. Blotso demonstrated his favorite bird calls. They were not a success. For 2 days, Mr. Blotso showed slides of his goldfish Lucy. Miss Nelson's kids had never been so bored. Poor Miss Nelson's kids. They never been so bored. While dusting erasers in the schoolyard, three of the ringleaders of 207 discussed the situation. Something will have to be done, they said. We must get rid of Bloodsworth. They have to get rid of Bloodsworth, the principal. And they hatched a plot. After school, they painted and they sewed and they borrowed some old clothes. And they practiced some very difficult stunt work in the backyard. They are really trying to get rid of the principal. That is not good. That is not good. The next day, they weren't in class. That's too bad, said Mr. Blodsworth. They'll miss all the excitement. Mr. Blodsworth was about to show the class his collection of ballpoint pens from all over the world when someone came to the door. Who was that? Slowly the doorknob turned and the door opened. So there's Mr. Bloodworth, and he's showing everybody the pens. Oh, look, said the class. Miss Nelson is back. A tall and lumpy Miss Nelson tortored into the room. Do you think that's Miss Nelson? Well, see. Mr. Bladsworth was surprised. You're back sooner than we expected, he said. The tall and lumpy Miss Nelson didn't speak. Said the kids. Her throat must still be sore. Are you sure you're well enough? Said Mr. Bladsworth. She's sure, said the kids. Well, in that case, said the principal, I'll be getting back to the office. Nice to have you back, Miss Nelson. And he left the room. So do you think that's really Miss Nelson? Or is that the children pretending that they are Miss Nelson? Let's see. It might be Miss Nelson, or it might be just the kids. Hot dog, cried the class. We got rid of Bladsworth. Now we can do just as we please. And at the stroke of 10, the kids from 207 left the building. No one stopped them. They left the building. Bad kids. They went straight to the movies where they saw the monster that ate Chicago twice. This is really living, they said. Afterward, they went to Lulu's where they stuffed themselves silly. But soon they made a serious mistake. See, yes, they made a mistake running out of school. Never, never do that. Never run out of your school. Yes. And never pretend that you are the teacher. Okay, never. You get in trouble. Yeah. Heading back to school, they passed Miss Nelson's house. Miss Nelson couldn't believe their eyes. Those are my kids, she said in a scratchy voice. What are they doing out of school? And who is that with them? That's not me, she said. No. Miss Nelson telephoned Mr. Blodsworth to see what was going on. You're not Miss Nelson, said Blodsworth. Miss Nelson is back. And he hung up. Can't fool me, he said. Something will have to be done. And she went to her closet. What do you think she's going to find in her closet? What do you think she's going to find in her closet? Do you think Miss Viola Swamp is going to come back? Back in 207, Miss Nelson's kids were spending an agreeable afternoon. They were very pleased with themselves. We should do this more often, they said. They did not notice the figure out in the hall. Uh-oh. Slowly the knob turned. And the door opened. Who do you think it was? Do you think it was Miss Viola Swamp? Do you think? Let's see. My name is Viola Swamp, said the lady in a scary voice. Yipes! Cried the children. The swamp! That's right, said Miss Swamp. And I'm here to whip this class into shape. Get back to those desks on the double. The class did as it was told. The big kid from 309 was certainly right. Miss Swamp was a real witch. There she is. Wow. Miss Viola Swamp came back. She knew how to get results. The class did a whole week's work in no time. We shouldn't have gotten rid of Mr. Blodsworth, they said. Pipe down, said the Swamp. Or just then something under a desk attracted her attention. I wonder what it was. It was a mask. Said Miss Swamp. So that's your little game. And she tried on the mask. Just as Mr. Blodsworth stepped into the room, Mr. Blodsworth, Mr. Blodsworth, I'm of opinion that someone has been impersonating you. Uh-oh, whispered the kids. Oh, they are getting in trouble now. You don't say, said Miss Swamp. Probably just some kids acting up. I'm sure it won't happen again. And Mr. Blodsworth left. So they found Miss Nelson's mask. And so she said, pretending to be Miss Nelson. She is Miss Nelson, but she's pretending to be herself now. So she said, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna happen again. And it won't, will it? Said Miss Swamp in the class. Because the swamp will be watching. A minute later, Miss Nelson appeared. I'm back, she said. So there goes Miss Swamp. And here is Miss Nelson. So remember, Miss Swamp is Miss Nelson, okay? So remember that. Hot dog, cried the kids. Are we glad to see you? Didn't you have fun with Mr. Bladsaw? Asked Miss Nelson. Said the kids. They decided not to mention Miss Viola Swamp, but they wondered why Miss Nelson hadn't seen her in the hall. Yeah, I wonder why. Because remember, Miss Nelson is Miss Swamp, right? Yes. So there is one more story. That's the end of that story. Miss Nelson is back. But there is one more story called Miss Nelson Has a Field Day. And I will read that tomorrow. But did you like the story today about Miss Nelson being sick, and then she the principal had to come in, and the kids didn't like the principal, and so they started to act bad, and then Miss Viola Swamp had to come back, which is Miss Nelson. This book is something else. But I just want to tell you, remember, when you go to school, do not act like these kids, okay? Listen to your teacher, okay? Don't forget, listen to your teacher. So I'll be back tomorrow to read the last collection of the Miss Nelson collection. So please come back. You're going to come back and join me for the last collection? Okay. I'll be here. Goodbye, goodbye. Story time is over. Goodbye, goodbye. I'll see you tomorrow. I hope to see you. What? Hope to see you. What? Hope to see you tomorrow. Goodbye. See you tomorrow. And have a beautiful, wonderful day today. Goodbye.